When we moved into our home roughly 15 years ago, most of our furniture was pretty sketchy. It was a lot of garage sale stuff. It was a lot of worn stuff. And gradually, over the years, I have built most of the furniture, all the furniture you see in his photos, and made most of the rooms nicer and more up to date. And we have generally given our home a nice craftsman style look, and rooms we can be proud of, and everything's nice and functional with the exception of the upstairs office area, which looks a little college dorm room like. So what triggered this remodel was I added these lights a couple weeks ago because this was a terribly dark corner, and then I realized just how sad our little office was. So what the plan is to put a wall cabinet on this wall. That's the 5-footer, the double 2.5 foot. Put a wall cabinet on this wall, and then that will help us kind of get some stuff up off the floor. It's tax season, which is making all this even worse than it normally is. And then I plan on putting an oak work surface from this corner and wrap it around. It'll be continuous instead of these 3 separate work surfaces we have now, and it will be somewhat self-supporting. That will allow the drawer units to be built separately and added as they get completed. And with a corner, there's always a lot of wasted space. I'm going to try to figure out how to use that space. But for getting started, we're going to do the wall unit. This is the lumber that I'm making the office suite. Maybe that's not the right word. The office furniture out of. It's pecan. It was cut down on one of the company job sites where I worked, and they gave me and a friend the logs, and we had them milled. So we have a lot of pecan. It's really rough stuff. It's got a lot of knots in it, a lot of splits. It's not clear, and it's got a lot of stains from the few weeks that we had it stacked when we first got it. It stained almost instantly. It's extremely hard. But so yesterday I ran lots of it through the planer, and I ended up with enough good wide boards to make the 6 sides of the 3 upper cabinets with full width boards. And now on the tops and the bottoms and the shelves, I don't mind having glue ups like this board here. Instead of throwing it away, I'll make 2 rips and glue them together, and probably have to glue a 3rd piece on. That way I can use up the majority of my wood instead of making firewood out of it. So it's going to be a rainy day, so this is a good project for indoors. Now it's gluing and clamping time, and I'm shooting for either a little over 12 inches or a little over 24 inches, so I can get maybe 2 out of some of these. And they're always try to make them 6 inches longer than what I need, so that when they go through the planer and it leaves that little snipe on the end, I can just trim it off. So I think this is enough shelves to build the upper cases. I'm going to run them all through the planer. And I did this all wrong according to the purists. I should have jointed the boards on one side before I ran them through the planer, or before I glued them up, so that they would be flat, because the planer doesn't necessarily make flat boards. If they're warped, it'll just smash them and make them smooth, and they come out the other end and bow back up. But I don't have a joiner that big, and I wasn't willing to spend the 3 days it would have taken me, so I'm going to plane them all, and if some of them come out bad, I'll just make a couple more. Okay, I took all the shelves. I still need to make 4 more, but I took what I had, ran them through the planer. They're not 100% planed yet, but I just kind of wanted to see what I had. Like this one still needs a few more passes. So what I need to do now, I have 3 cabinets. 2 of them are 2'6", and one of them is 3 foot. So I need a top and a bottom for the 3 foot, and a top and a bottom for the 2'6" cabinets. I'm going to pick the better ones for those, and I'm going to run them through the planer. They all need to be the same thickness, which will help me make my joints. And then the shelves, they don't really matter. They can be a 1/16 off from one another, because they're just going to be on shelf pins.
so they have more flexibility. But to make the joints easier, I want all of those boards involved with the joints to be the same thickness, and I've already got the 6 side pieces the same thickness, so that's next. So yesterday I ran all 12 boards, that's the 6 sides and the 6 tops and bottoms. I jointed them, which was pretty easy because most of them had been jointed once before. And then I ripped them on the table saw so they're all the same width. I ripped them without changing the fence. And then I cut them to length with my sled, and so they're all pretty darn accurate at this point. Now this is a drawing of the cabinets on the wall. I got 2 on this wall, I have 1 on this wall. When you walk into the room, you'll see this end, and when you're sitting in the room, you'll see this end. So I picked out my 2 prettiest, most select pieces for the end. So this is mark number 6, and this is mark number 1. And then I picked out the worst, the ones with the biggest problems, because these 2 cabinets are going to be shoved together, so one side of these won't be visible. And it looks good on one side, but it's got a piece coming apart on the other side, so this one is picked for the middle. And the same with all the rest of the pieces, depending on how visible they were. I shuffled them around, and I'll do the same with the top and the bottom. So now it's time to make the joint so I can put these 3 boxes together.
Yesterday I glued these 2 scraps together to make a guide for the router. It's basically just a right angle joint with one leg long enough to get the clamp on and get the clamp out of the way of the router. That sometimes is a problem when you're trying to make a router guide. And then the joints on the bottom of the side pieces is, I believe, called a dado. It's completely enclosed because that bottom shelf needs to be raised a little bit for the face frame. First, I hogged out this dado with a 3/4 bit on the bottom. Now on the top of the top shelf is flush with the top of the side. So that was more of a rabbet. The bit cut to the edge, that's an easier cut. The shelves are thicker than 3/4, so I had to cut an additional rabbet on them to make them fit, and that's a good thing because you get that like double interlock, which when you have boards that are less than perfect, maybe a little twist or a little bow, it really locks them together and forces them to be straight.
Getting ready to screw and glue my second frame together. I put the big one together earlier, kind of got my learning curve behind me. I am screwing it. So the screws on the bottom, I countersunk them and I'm putting plugs over them. The screws on the top will be hidden by the crown mold, so they're just going to show.
I've learned that when you're gluing this pecan, I guess all pecan, you really have to put a lot of glue on the end grain. I have had failures and taking it apart, and it's like, oh, I forgot to glue, but I didn't forget to glue. That end grain just soaks stuff up, which is probably why this wood will rot so fast in the outdoors. It is not an exterior wood at all. And I wanted to knock these plugs down right away while the glue is still wet, and it just makes it easier to slide the carcasses around without these little plugs catching on everything and breaking off.
I've got 2 of the thinner boards out of the stack, and I've got them planed down to 3/4 of an inch, and they've got some bad spots, but I'm gonna cut these up to try to get my stiles, which are mostly 1.5 inches wide. So with these 2 boards I should have plenty, I think. Face frame strips are all ripped up, and I think I will cut the top one first. This will be the longest one. It'll go past the corner, and then these outsides will come from the top to all the way to the bottom, and then the bottom will go between the 2 far sides, and the middle piece will be a filler. It will go from the top of the bottom strip to the bottom of the top strip. Go ahead and cut those to length. I'm going to put these together with pocket screws. Alright, so the stiles are cut for the double cabinet, and they're labeled. And what I need to do now is turn them upside down, do the pocket holes, and try not to screw it up. So they need to go exactly where they are right now. Okay, I got this the pocket holes drilled. I've had this tool for a while. I don't use it often. I'm never really comfortable with it, but I think I'm good. And I'm using the big sheet of plywood to square up the face frame. So I'm gonna start putting it together. Well, I put the big face frame together with the pocket screws, and this is probably the best luck I've ever had with those little things. And I attribute that to, one, I was real careful, and two, I have this big flat tabletop to work on. Usually I'm like working half on the table saw and half on something else. And three, I moved it around so I could use the clamp that they supply with the tool, and that made a big difference to hold the parts tight. So this big one's done, and I'm going to put the other cabinet up here and do that one. And then we'll put these to the side and start on the drilling the holes for the shelves.
Bought another new tool. It's a Craig shelf pin guide. It's just a piece of plastic with a bunch of holes in it, but it sure makes drilling these holes easy and accurate. It was worth every penny. Now I'm routing a groove for the plywood back. The little bit has a bearing that guides itself. I just need to try to keep the router as vertical as possible to keep the depth of the cut consistent.
So when we were framing our house, or when I built my house, I went to a lot of salvage yards because I wanted the look of the old New Orleans doors and the old New Orleans trim. And I answered an ad in the paper to go look at some roofing slates at a salvage yard. And turns out the guy was going out of business, lost his lease, he had to move out. I bought the slates, and looking around, I saw this stack of walnut veneer flinch cut plywood. And he said, make me an offer. And walnut's kind of a formal wood. I didn't need it in the house. I don't use it very often. But there were 20 sheets. I offered him $100. That's $5 a sheet. He said, take them. So I ended up, and I've been using them ever since. And I have 6 left. And I'm going to use them for the back of these uppers. It's really pretty stuff. It's something I would never, ever buy new. I've added my cleats, one to the bottom. This will be the this will be the bottom up against the wall, so I can put fasteners to screw it to the wall, and one under the top, same thing, to screw it, just to hang these things. I had to do that before I put the back on.
Using a router to cut the groove for the plywood leaves the corners round, so I could have either chiseled them square, but I just chose to round the plywood corners with the belt sander. Just takes a second and worked just as well, and less chance of messing something up. I'm finishing the plywood back panels with oil. It's not as durable as varnish or lacquer or any of those things, but it's really easy to put on, and it's not going to see any wear and tear because it's back of a shelf unit. So I'm going with oil, and it sure looks pretty on this walnut. On the box, I'm applying a mixture of stain, pre-stain, and thinner just to kind of even out this wood. It's got some wild spots where it's almost white, and then some spots that are black, and I just want to kind of mellow it out a little bit. So this morning I sanded both the face frames all the way around, all 4 edges, and it's time to put them on yellow glue, and I put the little spacers on the far sides, so just to keep me from making a mess. It lets me lay the face frame down, get the bottom straight, and get it tacked, and kind of work my way around without smearing glue all over the place, because the face frame and the outsides of the box do not have a finish on them yet, and it's kind of hard to get that glue residue off because it soaks into this pecan so fast. And then the double cabinet is now screwed together permanently, and it's pretty much the same procedure to put the face frame on it. They both fit correctly because I built them on top of the boxes. I didn't just go by measurements. I cut my own cove mold for the top to go around the top. There was no way I was going to be able to buy molding that looked anything resembling this kind of wood. And it's really not hard. You just need to use a lot of scraps and play with the guides back and forth until you get, a pleasing concave curve. And even though I played with it for a long time, I still had to flip the boards to cut from both sides so it would be centered, because it's real hard to get that curve exactly in the middle. And if it's not in the middle, it makes cutting the chamfers later on a little more challenging. So if you run it through, just make a small cut, maybe less than an 1/8 inch each time, raise the blade, do it again. It's pretty easy. It takes a little while, but it's pretty easy. So then with the table saw blade cranked over to 45 degrees, you run the strips both sides of both faces, and you end up with a nice little cove mold. Probably this one in particular, much heftier than if something I would have bought from a store. So that's a good thing. And I cut lots of extra because if you run short, it's pretty difficult to go back and cut some more and have it really match, because all this there's no measuring involved. It's just kind of a visual thing. So if you're going to do it, cut plenty.
So the only one I don't have a spare of is the long one that goes across the top of the double cabinet. So I got to make extra care that I cut that one right, and the rest of them I have extras. And I ended up with a lot of kindling for the fireplace. The cove mold has been installed. It's nailed and glued, and on both of them came out good. And I put these 2x4s here temporarily because I'm going to stand it up top side down so I can finish doing the varnish, and I don't want the weight to be on this molding. These things are pretty doggone heavy. They're upside down, but everything has a coat of stain on it, and the interior surfaces have a coat of stain and varnish. I can go ahead and complete all these shelves. They need to be planed top and bottom. Some of them have been planed partially. Ripped to width and cut to length, and then stained, and then varnished, and then varnished.
All the shelves are planed down. Some are a little bit thinner than others to get past some bad spots, but I'm okay with that. And then all of them have one edge run through the joiner, which I'm running against the table saw fence. And now they're all being ripped to width. And then we're going to cross cut them all with the sled. And because I made them long, I'm able to cut the little aggravating snipe off of one end, because there's always when they run them through the planer, right a couple inches from the end, you always get a bump, and it's hard to sand with this pecan because it's so freaking hard.
It's been a long day, but all 9 shelves are cut, sanded, and they have a coat of the stain sealer. And the 2 boxes have the initial coat of varnish on the exterior and the final coat of varnish on the interior. Calling it a day.
Now that the finish is complete on the interior of the boxes, I'm going to go ahead and put the backs on. I don't have to worry about spilling varnish on them anymore.
These cabinets are ready to go up, but they're heavy, especially this long one, and it's probably just going to be me and Debbie trying to hang them. So I have no lower cabinets to set these things on like typical kitchen build out. They're just going to be hanging on the wall. So rather than Debbie and I trying to wrestle these things and hold them straight and level and get a screw in them at the same time, building these little horses to hold them up against the wall. My math ability is no longer existent, so I can't figure the angle, so I just have this board. The top of it is 4 feet off the floor, and that's where I want the bottom of the cabinet to be. So I cut up some scraps. This happens to be some wedge trim that was going to go in the garbage. I'm going to put 2 legs on each one. The other side will prop against the wall, and I think that will hold them securely so we can get a screw or 2 in them.
So unfortunately, no action shots of actually putting the cabinets up on the wall, but these little horses worked perfectly.
Missed a good chance for some video yesterday when me and my teenage next door neighbor Nick got this shelf unit up these winding stairs, but I had my hands full, so no video. But we got it up here and we didn't put any holes in the wall. We didn't drop it. And now that it's up here, it's mounted, or they are mounted, and we're really happy with them. We have just 2 shelves installed so far. I have enough material to put 3 shelves in each box, but we probably won't need that many. But it's done. They are done, and now it's time to work on the work surface below.